All right, welcome along to the RT Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here, and I'm going to be joined very shortly by former Dundalk goalkeeper Gary Rogers and also journalist David Sneyd, where we're going to reflect back on Ireland's Nations League campaign in the colder light of a week on from the Armenia game. We're also going to look ahead to Shamrock Rovers' trip to Molde. They're heading up to Norway to play their third Europa Conference League group game, and will be looking to try and pick up their first point, and it's going to be a tough one on the road, so we'll see how they get on, but we'll tease all that out a little bit later on. We'll also talk League of Ireland, where Shamrock Rovers have maintained their lead at the top and Derry City are still giving chase, but also there were significant results at both ends of the table. And we'll also be talking about Liverpool. We have Champions League action live on RTÉ2 and the RTÉ Player. They're playing Rangers on Tuesday, so tune in for that at 7:30 tomorrow. But before we do that, we're heading into a very crucial week and a half for the Republic of Ireland women's national team. Vera Pauw's side, of course, have the second round of the playoff next Tuesday, and again, we don't know the opponent because this Thursday at Hampden Park, Scotland take on Austria, and the winner of that will play Ireland. Obviously, it's a very convoluted process, as we've discussed at length in the podcast previously, about how Ireland can get to the World Cup. If they're lucky enough, if they're the two best winners of the three second-round playoff teams, they go direct to the World Cup, but they could also be in the unlucky position of being the third team that has to go through a more convoluted playoff process against teams from other confederations. So Vera Pauw and her staff will obviously be keeping a very close eye on Thursday's game between Scotland and Austria, because they're both very tough teams. We saw Austria getting to the knockout stage of the European Championships this summer, and they gave England a really good game in the opening game of the tournament, before then beating what is normally a very, very good Norway to get to a knockout game against Germany, where they gave a good account of themselves, but bowed out at that stage. And Scotland have experience of playing in major tournaments as well. But Vera Pauw named her squad last week. There have been a good few injuries, but RT Sports' David Kelly was speaking to her on Friday, where she outlined some of the selection calls and also touched on the qualification process and how they're going to prepare for a match in which they're still waiting to find out who their opponent is.
Vera, first of all, just to give us an overview of the squad selection, 28 players selected. Unfortunately, some quite high-profile names unavailable, though.
Yeah, that is the reality that we have to deal with. We have a big squad, like we have always since Corona, to have at every line an extra player. And now we have 28 because we needed one player extra to get the flexibility to make our choices because of those injuries.
One of the most notable players returning, of course, and one of the most experienced is Liverpool's Sneyd Fahy.
Yes, and we're very happy that she's back playing. We see how it's going on, but she looked very good against Chelsea. She played the full 90 there, and that is a bonus to get that experience back in our team.
And just explain to me about the difficulty of the situation you find yourselves in, because obviously you're naming the squad today, but we don't know who we're playing yet.
Yes, we only know on the 6th of October, and we're sending 3 scouts to the game, one for one team, one for the other team, and Tom Elms himself, because he is presenting to the squad and doing the analysis of the opposition always. He will be there to have the feeling of the team, so that gives that little edge extra.
And obviously you have a connection to Scotland, having managed there before. Would you prefer to be playing Scotland?
I don't prefer any team. They're both equally very, very good. Different playing styles. The Austrian team is very well organized with some stars in it. Scotland is more dynamic, forward, less predictable. And we see who wins. If Scotland wins from Austria, they're the better team. So then you would want Austria. If Austria wins, you would have preferred Scotland. So yeah. They're equally at the same level, but complete different playing styles.
Now, obviously, the winner of Slovakia guaranteed a place in the second qualifying round, which is what you'll be playing against Scotland or Austria. But it is quite a convoluted qualifying system, and we could have a situation whereby when the Republic of Ireland play their game, if they've won it, they may not know at that stage if they've qualified.
Yeah, it's a bit weird that those games are not played at the same time. At least it's not a demand. We hope that it will be at the same time, but it's still not decided. But it's not a demand to play at the same time, and that's weird because the last game in a competition where goal difference can make the difference is always played at the same time.
We've seen this squad develop and grow in recent years, and in terms of self-belief and what the recent results have done for self-belief, I'd imagine that's clearly not a problem.
No, we don't care who we play, because we focus on how we play, what we do, and our tasks are clear in that. The players are given the space to act freely within those tasks, and you can see that we grow every single game from that.
And when the squad assembles, are there any specifics you're going to be working on ahead of this playoff?
Yeah, of course. Before Thursday, we work more on our finding out who are the best players for our system, because we need to find out a few things because of the injuries. And then after Thursday, we fully focus on our opponent.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's Vera Pauw discussing the squad and also the build-up to next Tuesday's very, very crucial and potentially historic second-round playoff for the World Cup. There has been another injury since that interview on Friday. So Jessu, who was in action for West Ham at the weekend and has been in really good form in her recent Ireland appearances, she's been ruled out due to an injury, and Shelbourne defender Kiva Keenan replaces her. Of course, Shelbourne were in league action at the weekend, and in the Women's National League, we're getting a four-way title race pretty much after the weekend's results. So Peamount are within 3 points of the top after beating Bohemians 1-0. Athlone Town beat the league leaders Wexford 2-1, so they're also 3 points off the top. Galway United lost 3-2 to DLR Waves, and then the reigning champion Shelbourne beat Cork City 2-1, so they're only a point off Wexford at the top. So 3 points separating the top four, so it's a really exciting title race. And moving on to Saturday's upcoming fixtures between the teams, none of the top four are playing each other, so they'll all be looking to maintain momentum. DLR Waves host Shelbourne at 4 o'clock. Cork City and Peamount play each other at 5. Treaty United host Athlone also at the same time. Bohemians host Galway at 6. And then Wexford are at home to Sligo Rovers. Now we are joined by Gary and David, but before we get on to Molde and Shamrock Rovers in the League of Ireland, I did want to kind of reflect back a bit on the Nations League campaign. And I suppose, Gary, what's your reflection on it now, like a week on and in the colder light of day?
Yeah, look, ultimately, I suppose you'd be disappointed to lose or to drop points in a couple of the games. There's definitely highs and lows in it. Look, we seem to be scoring goals, probably not keeping up with clean sheets. It's something that will have to be rectified when it comes to qualification campaigns. But I suppose all in all, for Stephen, I suppose he's learned a lot more about his players, brought through a few new players into the group and given them valuable experience. I suppose the game the other day, 3-2, like it was heading for disappointment after being in a comfortable position and for Robbie Brady to pop up at the end and get the penalty. But when you look at that game, I suppose for young fans and that were at the game, all they see is a 3-2 victory. I know we're obviously a little bit harsher critics, but it's not really great opposition, and it was almost a draw at home. But for people going to ground, the games are more exciting to go to. There's 5 goals in it. It was entertainment value, I suppose, was what you're looking at. When you have 5 goals in the game and a last minute winner, everyone is walking away happy. So I suppose, and that from that point of view, it's positive. But when you're going into the qualification campaign, that's when the real business is, and that's what Stephen will be judged on then.
Yeah, and last week Keith Tracy on this podcast, he was on alongside Johnny McDonald. He was making the point that he felt that Ireland, based on the Nations League campaign as a whole, are sort of sleepwalking into the Euro 2024 qualifiers. Do you concur with that, or are you more optimistic?
Look, it's hard to say they're sleepwalking in there, but it is difficult because it's not really they're glorified friendlies at the end of the day, and I know there is value to them in terms of ranking and it gives you better positions. But we knew, I suppose, coming into the last couple of games that we possibly weren't going to improve our rankings and give ourselves an opportunity to top the group, obviously. But it will come down to qualification, and I just think that that's where the real work begins. I think Stephen has had a good stint in the job now, and has brought in a lot of players and tried a lot of young players out, and I think he has a fair grasp of what he wants to do and the style of football that he's tried to implement. And there's definitely signs that there's massive improvement in Ireland. They're definitely more attractive to watch, and the crowds that are going to the games are certainly happier with the brand of football that's being produced. But now it comes to the results end of things, and that bedding period is probably more extended than some people would have liked. But I think he's got plenty of time, and now it'll go into the campaign, and he'll be judged on that then.
Yeah, and I was reading Paul Fennessy's review of the last 8 games for Ireland, and this is in the 42 for anybody who does want to read it. But it was just interesting looking at the kind of statistics and trends, David, that maybe the darkest times have generally been where we've had the most possession.
To be honest, I just don't understand how anybody could say Ireland have been sleepwalking through a campaign, or that some kind of plan hasn't been materialised into how Ireland are trying to play. Ireland now seem to have settled on a system and a way of playing. And I don't mean this in a way of playing. And Stephen Kenny spoke about this, about in the early stages, he did feel as if, he maybe went too far the other way about passing for passing's sake. And he spoke about that. And that there was a lack of penetration at times in Armenia, which, like Paul Fennessy's piece on the 42, I thought was very interesting in terms of breaking down the kind of just the numbers of it, and it is worth the read. But like, Stephen Kenny came in for a bit of criticism in the immediate aftermath after the Armenia game. And I think rightfully so, when he accepted it himself. A couple of days later, he did a Zoom call with a few of us and spent nearly 40 minutes talking to us. And he said, after the match, he was a bit too positive. He kind of, maybe you're in that mode after a game where you want to back your players maybe to the hilt, I suppose, no matter what. But he said his language was kind of, he used the right phrase, and he said it was an exceptional performance, a convincing performance, and obviously the nature of how the game went, that wasn't the case. But he also kind of pinpointed a lot of aspects, I thought, which were true in terms of that new dimension that Michael Obafemi is given, but also the fact that Ireland didn't do enough to work spaces against Armenia and create more 2v1 opportunities, where he was kind of saying they needed to do more, especially down the left-hand side. But like, if you're looking at, say, the Nations League campaign, if Ireland were to continue how they have been, like, then I don't think they will qualify for the Euros purely, even though obviously a third place would still get you to the playoff, and it depends on when the draw was happening. But there is definitely signs this is where I'm coming from. There's definitely signs that this is a team who now are on the cusp of actually being capable of doing a lot more and doing more. And now it's up to Stephen Kenny and the players who are there to actually deliver on that. Like, there have been moments like dropping 5 points from games when you've been leading against Scotland and Ukraine is an indication that Ireland can get into a position of controlling a game. What's let them down is not being able to sustain that and maintain that. That's one thing in the Euros campaign that's going to have to obviously change. Like, that's not, in my opinion, that's not a group of players sleepwalking into a campaign who haven't got a clue what they're doing and maybe aren't working towards something. So, like, and you see it with a lot of the coverage, even since, like, I think there's a feeling, and from one aspect, that it's like one camp is just cheerleading and another camp are being critical. Like, again, that's just not the case. It's just not the case. Like, everyone now is at the point where they are being critical and actually analysing, well, where is this team going? Like, I would say if Ireland were still making the same mistakes as that happened in that first campaign in the Nations League, and partly as well during the World Cup qualifying campaign in this campaign, and it was a case of in this Nations League campaign just gone, and it was a case that, you weren't seeing any kind of progress, well, then you'd be like, well, hold on, there's something up here. But I get the sense just from this campaign just gone that there is something. This next Euros campaign is going to be vitally important, because I don't think it's at a point where there is any more evolving really that needs to be done in terms of the players. It's now a case of actually those players who are in there and in the system that they're working, they seem to know what they're doing. Now it's actually a case of righting some of the wrongs that have happened in the Nations League campaign gone. And Stephen Kenny said it's about clean sheets now and adding that to the goals that have scored, because only 3 teams in League B scored more goals than Ireland in the Nations League campaign, and 2 of them were in Ireland's group. So now it's about actually at the other end of that pitch, and Kenny said it, having that culture of clean sheets and marrying the two, and that's now what's going to be the expectation.
Yeah, before we move on to Shamrock Rovers and Molde, the one thing we never really touched on last week, and just as your expertise as a goalkeeper, Gary, I wanted to just get your take on Gavin Bazunu, and particularly the second goal, and whether he could have done a little bit better with it.
Yeah, look, it's always easy to be critical of the goalkeepers, and Gavin, every keeper would be disappointed when a goal goes in. Probably feel he could have done a little bit better for it, but look, that's the nature of the beast. I think for Gavin, it's been good for him to get more games and grow. Like, he's thriving in terms of his career in the Premier League, and it's great for him to be getting, such high quality games. The Premier League, he jumped from League One to the Premier League now, and he's a regular for us, and he's going to probably nail down that position, given off the back of the run that he's got in the game. In the national team. So with Keane being injured and Mark obviously being on the bench for Bournemouth, so I think it's a case for Gavin to obviously settle into that role and become hopefully a mainstay for the qualification campaign. I think he's been terrific goalkeeper for such a young man, such great composure. And we expect a whole lot out of him because he started so well. So I don't like to be too critical on him, but he will be disappointed. Obviously, look, the keeper is always disappointed. Every goal goes in, because any goal goes in, you're thinking, well, how could I save it? So he'll reflect on every action that he makes in a game, and you go through the footage, and you're all the time learning as a goalkeeper. For everything that happens in a game, every goal that goes in, every cross, you're all the time learning from these things, and the more games you get, the more experience. He's just going to get better and better, and we're so lucky to have not just Gavin but Mark and Keane behind them in top class goalkeeping departments, and then you've got young goalkeepers coming through in the 21s and the 19s. And I think one thing that David was talking about there, in terms of the progression of the squad, and you look at all the players that have come through that Stephen has brought into the group, and you look at the 21s, how well they've done. I know they didn't qualify, but and the 19s were away and qualified into the elite stage. So there's really exciting times for Stephen and for Irish football in general, between the underage teams doing really well. Like, I know that the 17s were away in the Netherlands, had a good result over there. 19s obviously qualified. 21s were within a penalty shootout of qualifying for a major championship. So there's massive positivity around the future of Irish football.
Yeah, and the Euro 2024 qualifying draw is going to be this Sunday in Frankfurt, so we'll see what Ireland get in that. Their pot 3 team for that. Now, Shamrock Rovers obviously have had the experience of being in a pot. They were also a pot 3 team in the Europa Conference League, and they started the group campaign with a 0-0 draw against Djurgården at home, and then a 3-0 defeat at Ghent, and then it's Molde up next. But Gary, I know you have a bit of history with them, both with Sligo Rovers and Dundalk.
Yeah, I've been on the end of a couple of poor results against Molde. Look, they're a very good side. It's a terrific stadium over there, and they've changed the first time I played over there was a grass pitch, and the last time we played over there it was an Astro. But like I know we look at Astros over here and we talk about how poor they are or whatever else, but the one over there completely different than what you play on here. Obviously proper sprinkler system in it, and the pellets on the pitch are round, so the ball actually moves a lot quicker and a lot sharper. It's watered properly and all the rest, but a really, really good side. We were beaten 4-2 over there the last day, but they've a couple of terrific players and technically very good. I actually thought, when the group came out, I thought they'd be the best side in the group, and it'll be a tough task for Shamrock Rovers to go over to Molde and get a result, but it's an exciting challenge for them.
Yeah, they've started in the league, they've won their last 11 games in a row, beat Tromsø 1-0 at the weekend, but it's in the Conference League itself, a 0-0 draw with Ghent, and then a 3-2 defeat to Djurgården. But from Shamrock Rovers' point of view, from those first 2 games that they played, David, there's a little bit of a sense of optimism. I mean, yes, Ghent were much the better team, but they still created some good chances.
Yeah, but I suppose it's one of them where, like, I think when I think it was Dan Cleary in terms of that game, with just that slip and just those moments, and it kind of, listen, you can kind of say the same. I know we said it earlier about Ireland, where maybe just little moments in games where that can be crucial, and I think that's maybe what's kind of hampered Rovers a little bit, just key moments in games, and like just giving up, seizing up the initiative a little bit. Like the fact that you've mentioned it there, but the fact that domestically, same all that are obviously flying it, and maybe in Europe when the expectations have been on them a bit more, hasn't been quite there. So you have to wonder, well, how do Rovers assess this game? How do they kind of go at it? Like, do they try and go in and maybe be a bit patient and maybe give them a bit more respect and kind of ease your way into a game and try and not maybe make any silly mistakes? Or do you try and maybe take the game to them early and put them under a bit of pressure? Like, you would imagine, even though maybe things haven't gone great for them either as well, maybe in Europe, that when you think about that, like you've said it there, like 11 games in a row, you can't imagine that their confidence is going to be fragile. So like it is about being clever in how you go into the game. And I think maybe little things coming out. Like, I know maybe it's too simplistic to say it, but I don't think there's any doubt that just that win and the manner of the win away to Sligo at the weekend maybe eases a bit of that pressure in the league. Does that just kind of give a bit of a weight off to their shoulders when they go into this game? And like Gary will be better placed in terms of that. I think it should do. Like I don't think like you should be going into it maybe obviously having that bit more confidence about it. Dan Cleary, especially, would you like to think that he won't be thinking about what he did in Europe the last time out. But they're just like, and I've said it even going into this campaign, like with Rovers and even with Stephen Bradley, like there was more of an expectation. Like I did a piece with Ron, a few Rovers players from 10 years ago when they qualified in 2011, and spoke with Ronan Finn about it, and like Ronan Finn was talking about how well that just was amazing because no one expected them. Whereas now the games that they've played in Europe, these group of players for Rovers, like, not that it hasn't been that sense of enjoyment or maybe or whatever, but for him, and he's felt that, you know what, there's more of a sense of expectation. So like the Rovers players going in, even though, they didn't get the win at home to Dewgardens and then obviously had a disappointing result away in Belgium as well, like they'll be going there, and similar to what I'm saying about even with Nations League, you're going there because in a Conference League with teams who maybe are obviously on your level a little bit. It's not as if maybe you're in a group and it's 3 teams who are maybe superpowers. Like this Rovers team, they're an experienced side. And when we listen to Ronan Finn, you get that sense that, there's been mistakes have kind of hampered them especially in the previous game. But it's not something I don't think is going to linger with them. I think this group of Rovers players have that kind of maybe mentality of actually putting that behind them and trusting in what Stephen Bradley is doing. And I suppose for him as well, it's going to be a big test because to deliver in Europe as well would be a big thing for his own CV.
Yeah, and their system in recent times under their manager Erling Moe, who is not the most famous Erling in the world currently, probably for good reason. Not this week, and probably not for the last few years, and not into the future. So they've been playing 5-3-2 in the last while, and their top scorer Datro Fofana scored a penalty against Djurgården. He was sent off in that game, so he's not going to be available. But their captain is very experienced, Magnus Wolf Ekram. He would have been managed by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, both with the Man United reserves and then Molde as well. I think Solskjaer would have been manager when you were playing them with Sligo, I think, back in the day, back in 2013. And he's been there since 2018 and won the league with them in 2019. So they have a sense of stability and probably know what they're about, obviously, with a manager there that long. But so do Shamrock Rovers with Stephen Bradley. They have their system set in stone. So how do you expect them to set up, especially with the lessons from the Ghent game?
Yeah, look, they have to be more, I suppose, difficult to beat. First and foremost, you've got to go over there and stay in the game. I just felt they were just a little bit too easy to get at the gaps, I say, the lines between the midfield and the back three, and the full-backs were a little bit too high in them games. You've got to tighten that up. And Wolf Ekram is a serious technician. What a player he is. And they've got to be very disciplined when they do play, because he's got tremendous delivery as well and can cause serious problems with that. We look at, obviously, Jack's got great delivery, and there's like Dylan Watts is a good deliverer, but this guy is fantastic, and he caused, I mean, when we played again, he caused us all sorts of problems from set plays. I think they could have had 13 or 14 corners, and they looked really dangerous. Now, our setup at the time didn't help. We were all over the place in terms of the zonal defence. Didn't like it at all. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I think Shamrock Rovers have to be, a little bit more solid in the defence, and I suppose the wing backs need to be tucked in a little bit narrower and make it just that block with the two midfielders sitting in front of the three, and the full backs, the wing backs in a bit narrower. Make it a little bit more difficult to beat. And look, I didn't like that. I suppose the ball that Alamanis played out to Dan Cleary, I don't see the value in playing that ball 5 yards either side from the goalkeeper. I think they should be much further higher up, and a little bit more variation, especially at that stage in the game. You don't want to cough anything up easy in the first 20 minutes of the game. You've got to work your way into the game, keep it really, really tight. And, I think Shamrock Rovers are capable of doing that. And I think Stephen is a very good tactical manager. I think they will learn from, the errors. And the one thing I would say in European football, any slight little error, you're going to be punished, because that's the difference when you go up the levels. And it's the same for Shamrock Rovers. They will get chances. And if they can take their chances in the game, well, that kind of puts a whole different pressure on Molde then. So like it's about being, it's a bit like, you know, it's boring as it may seem. It's about being solid at the back, and then when you work your opportunities, you know, it's being brave on the ball and having the courage to play. And I think the likes of Jack Byrne has been getting more game time, and when you see him, you know, getting that game time, I think he'll be better for it. And they really need, like, I would always remember the best, say, Dundalk team or the best even Sligo team, when Joseph Doe played for Sligo, he was terrific in Europe because he had that courage to get on the ball. You know, when it came to European football, you need your better technical players to come and get that ball and take it in areas that, you know, to be brave on it and just to keep it, because you get your breather with the ball. And like, I think Shamrock Rovers with Jack obviously playing, like, he played really well the weekend against Sligo. Was terrific in the build up for Dylan Watts' goal. So it's you know, players like that are going to be massively important. But the defensive shape is going to be key too.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned Joey Undoe there, who's also a noted co-commentator now as well, based on some of the clips I'm hearing. Very good at that. But also just going back to what David said there about Shamrock Rovers winning 3-1 at Sligo Rovers, and I guess how freeing that is. And you've had that experience, Gary, of trying to marry European form with trying to, you know, maintain a league challenge, and more often than not successfully. So it must be, from your own experience, does it sort of cleared the mind a little bit going into those European games, especially when you've come off the back of a crucial win, when, you know, say Derry City in this instance are hot on your heels, but you just keep leaving that little bit of a gap and breathing room for yourself?
Yeah, look, I think, you know, Shamrock Rovers are in pole position. They'll be really happy where they are. They're 5 points ahead. You know, there's 5 games left in the league, and it's difficult for the players because you've got massive games in Europe, and then you're bouncing into a game on a Sunday, which is vitally important because, you know, you don't get to play in group stages unless you win the league, and the best route to do that is obviously by winning the league and you know, going the champions route through the qualification campaign. Now, both, you look at the run in, the both teams, like Rovers have Shells, Drogheda, Pats, Derry and UCD. They obviously fancy to beat UCD in the last game of the season, but there's 2 Dublin derbies in there, and they also have to play Derry, so they just need to keep, you know, taking over them results. That was a really important result for them away in Sligo. Sligo is one of them places where you can go and you can get turned over, but it wasn't to be. Shamrock Rovers were ruthless, turned up, played really well, dominated the game. You know, got the goals, the 3-goal lead, obviously conceded a goal late on in the game. But, you know, that's the sort of ruthless performance that you would expect from them. It becomes a little bit more difficult, you know, when it gets to the, you know, the crucial games that get you over the line. But I do expect the Shamrock Rovers to have enough, you know, to see out the campaign and retain their titles. But, you know, it's a huge challenge when you bounce into massive games. One thing I would have always noticed when they're European games, when you go and you play against top quality opposition, the likes of Molde and that, you know, when you come back out of it, there's generally a bounce and you come back. I remember playing Rosenborg in 2 games and we come back, we obviously got beaten in the tie, but our league form afterwards, we went on a terrific run because we've been used to playing at a higher standard and, you know, doing things a little bit quicker. So sometimes you can get that bounce out of Europe where, you know, you're having to perform do everything that little bit quicker and, you know, going into your league game. So it can work both ways. Like, some people say, oh, you'd be tired coming into the game, and they were a little bit lethargic in the Derry game in the cup, and it cost them the cup. But I think, you know, given what's at stake in terms of, you know, qualifying for the Champions Path and winning the title, I think, you know, they might actually get a little bit of bounce out of playing, you know, higher opposition.
Yeah, and it was Daniel Cleary, Dylan Watts and Graham Burke with the 3 Shamrock Rovers goals before Pineacker got the 75th minute consolation for Sligo. But David, just on the second goal, if you call it the Dylan Watts one, obviously Dylan Watts himself is involved in the build-up, but just looking at the clip of the little bit of magic from Jack Byrne and then the pass he slipped through, just, you know, he's starting to show kind of signs of kind of getting back to his best now.
No, it was a great pass, great bit of vision, and as you say as well, the little turn as well, just to get away from it. But also the run makes it as well. Like, there's no pass there without the run, and obviously you need both. But it's just been a very frustrating time for Jack. I met him at the very start of the season, just for an interview, obviously looking ahead to the year, and he was very excited coming back. Obviously Cyprus, and he had his injury issues out there as well, and it was just a case of, obviously he had other options. He actually could have signed for Sligo. I remember when Liam Buckley was the manager, Liam Buckley got in touch with him and was saying, listen, and he spoke to him about it, just out of respect for Liam Buckley. And I don't think it came close, but he could have easily actually, if Liam maybe had been able to convince him, he could have actually been playing for the bit of red. But it was just been a very kind of stop-start time for him this season between one thing or another. He kind of, even before the season, I remember being at a game out at UCD and he went off after about 35-40 minutes, more so out of precaution because I think they were maybe 3-0 up at the time or 2-0 up. And I think it was his calf or a thigh injury. And that kind of just seemed to be the start. I think that was obviously maybe around early June. And it's just been a horrible time for him. It's not been the season he's wanted at all coming back. But obviously he's persevered. Rovers, he's beginning now to kind of get that run of games and get that sharpness. And listen, maybe it could be ideal time. And like, it's one of them where it's been said about Rovers from the very start, like the depth of squad has been, especially domestically, is there to see. And like maybe it's been a frustrating time for him, but this could be it. Like this is the most, what was it, Ferguson said, squeaky bum time, isn't it? Like this is where matters are going to be decided. You know, this is where a player like Jack Bourne, again, being able to pick that pass even domestically in the league is going to be crucial. And if he's able to kind of find the kind of form and the ability that we know he has and produce those moments even in Europe, it's going to be major. I don't think it's really happened yet for him, especially in Europe. And like Gary mentioned earlier, just on that point, is like about obviously keeping it tight in those European games, but also when chances do come, like you need players like Jack's quality to actually be the one to make sure that when the opponents slip up, that it's punished. Like there was a moment in the Ghent game, and I don't think it came from a chance, and there was a mistake where their goalkeeper played it out again, similar, and I think Rory Gaffney could have had opportunity. I think that was at 2-0, and he kind of misses the chance, you know. And those little moments, maybe now where you have like someone like Jack Bourne and he's flying it, like, which still don't think he's anywhere near maybe the top level he can be, where he was getting in around the Ireland squad, you know. Like that's a conversation that hasn't been around, and it'll be another while before it's there again. So like if he's able to make an impact, a serious impact in the European games, then that'll obviously be something that will be spoken about. But I think at the moment for him, it's just about getting back in and playing regularly, and just having that, again, Gary will know it as a former player, just having that trust in your body again and feeling in that rhythm, because I definitely think he's that type of player who needs to be just constantly at it, you know, and getting that match sharpness and just that speed of talk, because that's what he relies on as much as anything.
Yeah, I think the Ireland stuff, because we had him on this podcast, myself and Conor Neville were speaking to him last December, and you know, we touched on the Ireland thing, but he kind of said it himself, like he needs that run-in of a season first before he can even start thinking about that.
Yeah.
And at the start of the season, it looked like potentially he was on the cusp of it, but as you said, with that injury he had against UCD, then it's sort of, he hasn't. Yeah, it's been stop-start since.
Yeah, and like, just sorry for cutting across, Raf, but even just on that, I kind of feel because of how the season has gone and all the rest of it, it's something that, I know it was mentioned, you can't not mention the Ireland stuff, because obviously he had been previously in and around it, but like it's just one of them where, like, I mean, you just want to see him now playing and having that kind of, having that just fitness, really, because like he does offer so much, and for him to be in the league, it's like, well, obviously anyone except for Rovers fans will be delighted, because as you're saying, like, he could be a bit of a key difference now in the next couple of games, even though they have got that bit of a healthy lead. Just having that caliber of player, it's just going to be so vitally important, especially in Europe. And that's why if you can stay fit and have that sharpness, you would like to think that Rovers could be capable of at least picking up a few points and giving themselves a series to count themselves in those games, you know.
Yeah, and on Friday, the games, it was Bohemians beating UCD 1-0, so that has an impact at the bottom end of the table. Of course, UCD, and due to Finn Harps' results, which we'll bring you very shortly, UCD are now bottom on goal difference, and Bow's up to fifth, despite some of the recent inconsistencies. So that's obviously a little bit of optimism for them. And then Dundalk getting back to form and ending a run of games without victory by beating Drogheda United 2-0, with Runar Hauge scoring a penalty and then a Dane Massey own goal. And then probably the big one in terms of the top end, Derry City beating St. Pat's 1-0, with Kavanagh scoring the winner with 20 minutes to go, and then a couple of sending offs, including Chris Forrester in stoppage time. And then Finn Harps 1, Shelburne 1. So Finn Harps second from bottom now on goal difference. Might start on Derry and Pats, actually, Gary, just given where it is in the table. But In terms of Derry, I know you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier in terms of how you mix the European games with, a league campaign. But from a Derry point of view, that thing of being the hunter or the hunted, which one did you find was most conducive to, I suppose, on the mentality side?
Yeah, look, I suppose you have to change it up depending on what scenario you're in. But like, it's always nice to have that lead. Like for Derry, it's a massive test. I think they've got to win every game, and that's including Shamrock Rovers. So they've Harps the weekend, Shell, Sligo, Shamrock Rovers, and Dundalk. They don't really have any easy games, and they've been just to go to Pats and win 1-0 was excellent, and they've just been kind of like they had a poor run in the middle of the season, which has probably curbed their kind of title run, if you like, a little bit, and they'll reflect on that, and I think that's one area where they'll need to improve if they're going to be title challengers for next season. And like, I know it's not done and dusted. It's great to have kind of a run in with 5 games, and it's definitely not decided. Although Shamrock Rovers would be massive favourites, but if they can, like I said, Derry can't slip up, and if they win all their games, obviously Shamrock Rovers could win 4 to win it, but like the challenge for Shamrock Rovers will be to beat Shell, Drogheda and Pats, and then come into the Derry game, it'll be a tight decider for them. So and the thing about Rovers is this year they've struggled against Drogheda, so they've 2 Dublin derbies and Drogheda, which hasn't been a given for them. Like they beat them in the cup in extra time, and it's just like it's been a sticky one for them. But I still think it's a great challenge for the Derry players, and a lot of them will be kind of, I know they have got experienced players like Mickey Duffy and Patrick McElhenney and Cameron Dunnigan, and these guys that have had title runs, that won titles and cups before. But for some of the younger players coming through to do the business when it's on the line for them, it'll be a great experience for them. If they can go and win their 5 games, that'll give them massive confidence. It won't guarantee them the title, unfortunately for them, but it gives them something to kind of really build on for next season. But it's great to have a run into the season where it's certainly in the balance, and like we'd be hoping that both teams come to that second last game of the season, that there's something there to a really juicy encounter for a league title.
Yeah, and they have a cup semi-final, of course, with Treaty United later this month as well. And then potentially, if they can get through that, obviously another big showdown in the final against whether it's Shelburne or Waterford on the other end. So they'll have, like Shamrock Rovers, they actually do have another folks as well. But David, in terms of Pats, I mean, they were on a great run, 5 wins in a row previous to losing to Derry City. But luckily for them, in a way, they have an immediate fixture tonight to try and bounce back.
No, yeah, I suppose what's that cliche, isn't it? Where it's like just move on to the next. We go again. That's kind of coming into football lexicon. We go again. I was half expecting like a string of tweets from Pat's players just to say, hashtag fans were class and we go again on Monday. But
I sense the sarcasm, David.
I know. Well, do you know what? Right, it's not just on to do with Pat's, but that's just a general pet peeve I have now. Like I know, obviously, social media. And listen, I hold my hands up. Obviously, I'm a disgusting self-publicist on social media with Twitter, but I do it as part of the job. But I just don't understand why players bother. Like I don't think do fans care if a player comes out and says, fans were great. Like, you know what I mean? Like I think Pat's players might get away with it. I remember actually, on that point, this is a total divergence, but I remember again it was similar to this time last year before the FA Cup final, and Chris Forrester, although in fairness, he let himself down by getting sent off in the manner he did. Especially being one of the experienced players, but talking about young lads who he felt as if some young lads only play football now just because they can post stuff up on Instagram and all the rest of it, you know what I mean? Which that kind of, I said it to him at the time, that kind of shows where he is in terms of his own age profile when he's giving out about lads, but younger lads. But sorry, a total divergence there. But like I think Pat's players can get away with it because Pat's done very well the last little while, and the point has been made even on like what Gary said maybe about Europe, and like Pat's kind of seem to go and use the European stuff as a way of a bit of a springboard to actually put themselves in this position. Because I'll be honest, going into the European games, they were kind of, to use maybe Keith Tracy's phrase, they were kind of be sleepwalking a little bit. But I think, in fairness, they obviously Pat's would have been maybe good is probably the wrong word, but coming out on the wrong side. But it was Derry are going for the league. Let's be honest, and like I don't think they have that little extra bit of quality, but I just think and the point Gary made earlier kind of just, it actually kind of resonated there when I was thinking, I think Pats have used the European run as a bit of a springboard, and they were unfortunate as well a little bit in terms of how it did end. I think they came very close as well to maybe going a bit further. They've done really well, and the way their season hasn't petered out. And yeah, like if you go back to even in the cup, which obviously was in between the European games when they got knocked out by Waterford, you're kind of thinking then like that could have been a bit of a dangerous moment. You're kind of thinking, well, what's going to happen here now? Do you know what I mean? But now, in fairness, Tim Clancy, John Daly, and the staff there, and even the group of players have put on a really impressive run of form. And you kind of would, not that you would expect them, but you kind of don't worry. You're not kind of thinking, oh, that could be the result that everything seems fragile. Some teams maybe they might have one result and it could be very fragile to the confidence, and they might go on a run where it's maybe 3-4 without a win or getting back. But you kind of get the sense that with this Pats team, that they maybe have that bit more of a backbone about them and can actually bounce back. And maybe Shells, although obviously like David maybe got other things on their mind now with the cup and being safe in the league, will they drop off? Can't imagine Duff will allow them to. But you kind of get the sense that it's not going to be the kind of a collapse for Pats. And now I say that probably tempting fate, but that's just the kind of, I would say, the testament to the work that Tim Clancy has done, just in terms of, think about when he would have come in after obviously Stephen O'Donnell leaving at the start of the season, and the overhaul of players. And like a big thing for Pats would have been keeping Adam O'Reilly when he could maybe was talk he might have been leaving during that transfer window. So I think it'd be a test for them tonight against Shells. But if they bounce back and get a result, I think they'll just have enough to keep the edge and stay clear of balls. And like what Gary said earlier about Derry having to win all the games, I think Bows have to do the same. And I just don't think Bows have the quality at all to be able to put a serious run together towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I was talking to Forrester a couple of weeks ago just at the EA Sports thing at the Aviva Stadium. He was also making that point that, yeah, as you said, the European games, they have felt galvanised by that. And then you throw in the change of system as well with the three at the back seems to have worked for them.
That's why I said it, Raf, because I remember I read that. That's why I said it. That's why it was in my head.
Fair enough.
I should have quoted you properly.
Fair enough. I'm not too hurt by that. But Dundalk, obviously, look, they're the timing for them at the weekend, Gary, was sort of perfect, because they had been on a poor run, and then if you throw in the cup quarter final defeat on top of it, and just as things were looking a little bit worrying, they have cemented third place a little bit. Obviously, Pats still have the game in hand tonight, but especially against a Drogheda United team that in Drogheda have caused them problems this season.
Yeah, and I think if you look at it, Drogheda had a couple of chances early in the game, really, like from the tip-off. Dean Williams had a couple of really good chances, so it wasn't kind of plain sailing. You look at 2-0 and you think, oh, job done for Dundalk, but it probably wasn't as easy a game as that scoreline suggests. So look, Dundalk have probably struggled, the game up in UCD where they lost as well. Like it's been, after getting the points awarded them as well, it's been kind of, they're stumbling towards that third spot, if you like, at the minute, and that game against Drogheda will give them that little bit of injection that they needed, because certainly a draw or defeat there would have really hurt them. I think Pats have a lot of momentum behind them. They got beat by Derry, but 1-0 in competitive game, Derry just edged them out. But yeah, for Dundalk, I think the loss of Pat Hoban has been massive. He's been key, to them, that goal threat, but the work rate, he dictates the press, if you like, from the front. I think he's been a massive loss, along with Connolly as well, who went mid-season to Derry. Like he'd been excellent, and he's been very good for Derry since he's gone in there. So they're two key players that have missed. You look at the pace of Daniel Kelly, he's been injured, and he's injured for the remainder of the season. So I think for Stevie O'Donnell to get across the line, get Europe, it'll be, he'll be able to reflect on the job well done, because it has been challenging, because the squad isn't. You remember the squads that I would have been involved with. You would have said the massive big squads, and you could have played any 11 nearly at one point. But he's not blessed with that size of squad now. So it's been a really good managerial job in terms of what he's done. To possibly get European football, which would have been the goal at the start of the season.
Yeah, and then at the bottom end, Finn Harps now, as I said, are second from bottom on goal difference, so minus 30 for them, and UCD minus 38. And David, I know obviously I think a few months ago we were talking about your piece when you went up to Finn Harps, and it had been fairly clear. It had been fairly clear, I think, in that Ollie Horgan had said at the start of the season that he knew this would be his toughest season, and it's kind of proving that way. But the kind of, I suppose, the optimism for them, even in regards to UCD, haven't been in reasonably good form recently, but Finn Harps have that home game coming against UCD later in the season, which is probably going to be decisive given that they're so nip and tuck, and I would imagine neither side's going to pull away from the other before the last couple of games.
No, that's it. It's like second last game of the season, isn't it, as well? So like, and as you say, like, it's not one of them where one of the teams is maybe a few points ahead, and they could go into where they've got a serious points gap, and as the season has gone on, as they could show, neither team has been capable of doing it. Although, fairness, Harps, Brendan Clark, talk about goalkeepers, and like, I think Gary might want to jump in, just wax lyrical about Brendan Clark save any opportunity to prize another goalkeeper. But it was like Harps again. They had the chance. They could have stolen that, not stolen the game, but could have got that game, won that game. It was a fantastic save from the Heather Lupin save from Brendan Clark. But it's like a kind of, I'll be honest, as the season's gone on, you kind of wonder, like, well, Ollie Horgan and the work he's done there, and obviously he is now, isn't he? He's the longest serving manager in the league. Like, you wonder what toll it kind of takes. And like, as much as Anton, where I kind of got the sense from that article I did with the two with Bastian Healy and Dave Webster. Obviously, Bastian, who has now left the club, and obviously Dave kind of had that bad injury. So I think they both kind of maybe regret me putting the being a bad influence, maybe actually doing that article, because I don't think I've done either in the world ago. But like, you wonder, like, as much as it takes its toll for players, like, you wonder after all this time, like, the slog of it for Ollie Horgan, like, what if he can survive, if he can keep them up this year, what will he do? Or if they go down, will he have it in him? I don't mean that to say I'm writing them off, but it must take, like, to be constantly having those battles. We talked about Keith Long at Bowes, and obviously he was obviously able to do it at the top end, obviously with the budget and all the rest of it, he would have been able to get, and then obviously earn as well by qualifying for Europa. But when you're constantly maybe rebuilding, and you have to, not so much wheel and deal, but you have to keep on going to the well a little bit, and it's hard to kind of continually work with a settled group of players. It must be difficult for any manager. And at this point, like, I think the easiest thing in the world to say is, you trust Hearts to stay over and be in the playoff position, just because they've been there so many times. But sure, it's been hard. It's been Ollie who's the one who's been there all the time. Like, the players have changed so often. They obviously maybe have got maybe a bit of a core, a couple of group like Ryan Connolly or whoever, who maybe you've been in there before. But it's, I don't know. It's just, you just don't know. I don't think maybe some of the past experiences that Harps have had will maybe stand to them as much in terms of that, and it could maybe that the fact just because there has been that turnover in players, but that, as you say, like that last, I wonder now, actually, this 2 second is Rovers and Derry, is that the second last game as well for both teams? I'm not too sure if it is. I think it's near enough near the end.
UCD play Rovers last,
UCD play Rovers last, but the second last game of the season for Rovers, I think, could be Derry. I'm not, but that could be someday in terms of you could have
it is Derry,
so like same day in terms of having those two games on, like that could be an awful lot decided at both ends of the table. But I think what you said, Raf, is spot on. The fact that I think it'll be more so deciding that game wouldn't possibly decide it purely because I just can't see either being capable of pulling away from each other until that point. Maybe that one will be the one, and maybe I think Harps at home that could maybe swing it.
Yeah, and what they're trying to do, obviously, is to avoid the drop into the first division. And the results there were Waterford 3, Cove Ramblers 1, Treaty United 1, Galway United 1. And we're going to talk about Galway very shortly because they've had a little drop off in form. And then Athlone Town 2, Longford Town 2. So that's the Midlands derby, and Athlone showing signs of a revival, currently second bottom now. And then Wexford beating Bray Wanderers 4-2. So what that does to the table without Cork City kicking a ball, they're now essentially one win away from automatic promotion. And then Galway now just 3 points ahead of Waterford. Now, again, they're all going to be likely to be in the playoffs anyway, so it's fairly academic at this point. But in terms of Galway, Gary, and their form, because up to the summer they were, midsummer they were sort of nip and tuck with Cork City, and then they've just found themselves, unable to kind of pick up results consistently. And what do you put that down to?
Yeah, look, it's probably been obviously they've lost Alex Murphy to Newcastle, which would have been a blow for them. They just lacked that little bit of consistency. I think it was neck and neck, and they were both either Cork and Galway were going head to head, and they were winning every week. But then you look at teams as well, like the Waterford have started to get a bit stronger. Wexford have been strong. Longford, Treaty beating UCD in the cup as well. So there's no gimmies, and you look at the weekend, even Galway got a very dubious penalty, to get a draw match against Treaty this week. So it's hard to kind of probably maintain that. And I think once it was getting away from them a little bit, I think Cork have looked winners nearly for the last 5 or 6 weeks, really, if you're being honest about it. And they're probably seeing it at the weekend. So I think they're kind of doomed to playoffs, if you like. And I suppose given Galway's form in the playoff last year, where Bray beat them in the playoffs, they'll probably be a little bit apprehensive about it because Waterford look a really good side. I think you look at the players and the squad that they probably have the most talented squad in the first division, if you like. And Phoenix Patterson looks a real quality player. So I think the playoffs are going to be hugely challenging for Galway. It's not to say that they won't get up. Obviously, the full-time team, they've had tremendous support down there this year. So I think, whether it's Waterford or Galway, if they were to get up, they'd be a welcome addition to the Premier Division. I know Longford are in the mix as well. And Gary Crone has done a really good job there to get them. They play a really good brand of football. And, he's reached the playoffs with Bray last year. And once again, it looks like there'll be playoffs with Longford this year. So it's it's definitely in the balance, but you'd worry a little bit because obviously Galway got beaten by UCD in the cup, which is a kind of, you would have kind of half fancied Galway to beat UCD, but even that, another kind of a little bit of a mental blow, if you like, going into these playoffs. And look, they've just dropped off. There's no doubt, Walshy, who was a left back, centre back, scored some amount of goals for them this season up front. So they've really found a serious goal threat, and there is goals in the team. But playoffs are they're on a knife edge. It's how players handle them on the day, because it's not like your league campaign where you turn out every week. It's very much in the moment, and they need players to turn up on the day and do the business.
Yeah, and Waterford, David, have a lot of momentum, obviously, and as Gary just said there, obviously once you get to playoffs, obviously you've that knockout element. Their cup experiences are also going to give them a little bit of an edge with that, I guess, as well.
Yeah, you would imagine so. It's like that, and we're just trying to carry momentum of performances and just having that belief. And you would imagine, if you look at it like Waterford, you would think had that. They've obviously recently had that change of manager. I think Cheryl coming in, and obviously Gary's mentioned there things. Patterson, maybe just have lads who could be just hitting a vein of form, but then maybe the playoffs can do mad things. You know what I mean? Like heroes can come out of nowhere. Remember, was it a few years ago? Remember, was it JJ Bandit came out of nowhere for Finn Harps? He was still in school and he kind of did the business for them. But it's just I kind of find it interesting even with the whole Galway thing, because obviously you listen to John Caulfield, it was only a couple of weeks ago when he was kind of conceding the title to Cork, and obviously it's taken Cork because at that point we got 10-11 points clear, and he was kind of mentioning the fact that obviously the change of ownership with Galway, and that was going to effectively be coming in at the end of this season with the Comer brothers coming in. So you would imagine there's going to be like with the money they have and the financing there, and obviously their relationship with the club, you think there's going to be serious back in there. And maybe it's, I don't know if it's kind of looking at it from the point of view of you told people it would be great, even it was mentioned at the start of the season with the Premier Division, just the kind of the concentration of clubs that were in and around Dublin, and the fact that there wasn't that more of a spread. So ideally, if you have the likes of, say, Cork coming up, and obviously if UCD were to go down, or if Harps stay up, or if there's another one coming up, Galway, Waterford, it just possibly Longford, you kind of just have that spread, and it can be no bad thing. And you kind of feel as if maybe could Galway be on the cusp of something with those new owners coming in and with the backing they have. But then you also get that sense as well with Waterford. I think I said it on here that their name was on the cup just because of all the madness that's gone on there. But on the serious point, you also kind of say, you kind of get that sense when you see the crowds that are at Waterford when things can be going well, and when you have that sense of maybe a bit of more of a purpose about them, that just the kind of actual, I don't know, not that it's everyone talks about Waterford in town and the city about kind of with football and the actual kind of how do you feel on the cusp of something, do you know what I mean? Just like, but they need, that's what, and again, like, I know I felt bad afterwards actually just joking about it, because like there's people at Waterford who give their life and soul for the club, you know, and they want to see them be able to progress and have people there who are properly serious and want to be able to take it forward. And that's why that's kind of adds another little element here, I think, to what could happen maybe in the playoffs, maybe if it is with Waterford and Galway, because one of those clubs, not that it will shape what's going to happen for them for the next little while, but it can give them that catalyst to go on and really and kick on for next season if they were to get up into the Premier Division.
Yeah, and then speaking of sort of, you know, picking up form, obviously, as I said, Athlone have been in reasonably good form recently. Obviously, they were bottom for quite a while, but now moved above Cove Ramblers in the last few weeks. They do have to play the 3 top teams in the division before the season ends. But Gary, in regards to their situation, I mean, they're still operating under the director of football, Dermot Lennon, still managing them. And I think I remember back in April, he was saying, you know, they wanted to get an appointment done as quickly as possible after Martin Russell and then parted ways. It hasn't happened, but it's interesting though towards the end of the season, and including the 2-2 draw in the derby there with Longford, that they have found some sort of vein of form despite all the struggles they've had this season.
Yeah, look, as quickly as possible. It's not very quick, is it? It's certainly dragging, but there's a job there for somebody, you know, for next season. And I think, you know, the way they've progressed, you know, in the latter half of the season, you know, it's testament to the group of players that have been there. You know, they've obviously knuckled down and you know, put some decent performances together. And you've got to remember, like, these players are all obviously, you know, they're out there playing, and you know, they're looking for whether a new contract at that club, or they're in the shop window to go to another club as well. So you'll always have that with players when it comes to short-term contracts, or you know, players, you know, they really, you know, from now to the end of the season and playing against the top clubs, I think you'll find that they'll put in good performances there, because they'll be eager to go to some of these top clubs that might be going to Premier Division. It's an opportunity for them to kind of showcase their talent and possibly get a move, you know, to up a division maybe, or to a team that goes up. So, you know, it's no surprise when you know, obviously there's a little bit of stability there, that they've I suppose they've gone with the format they have from now to the end of the season, and they're going to look at an appointment for next season. So they've made that clear that that's what they're going to do, and players have probably just settled into their roles. You know, there is a little bit of stability there in terms of they're not going to be watching who's going to be coming in the gate every week to manage the club. So they've just knuckled down, and great credit to the players. You know, they put in some really good performances, and you know, a draw away against Longford was good result from the weekend. But you know, they've been scoring goals and putting in good performances, and getting a few points on the board as well.
Yeah, and then the live Champions League game we've got on RTÉ2 and RTÉ Player this week. It's Liverpool against Rangers. That is Tuesday night, 7:30, if you want to tune in for that. And they're coming off the back of, or Liverpool that is, coming off the back of a 3-3 draw with Brighton at the weekend, where they had their first choice midfield back, so Thiago, Fabinho and Henderson. But there's a real weird sense of drift, David, looking at them over the last few weeks before the international break, and then, you know, the continued problems then that they had on Saturday. I mean, I was just looking at a piece Andy Jones wrote in The Athletic, and he was just talking about their tactics and their mentality, and he just said, he quoted Klopp basically, who said, "I cannot say I was 100% convinced we would not concede a goal when we were 3-2 up, which leads to a sense of uncertainty." And then Van Dijk also said, "We were trying to put pressure on the ball, but teams are adapting to us as well." So there's a real sense of uncertainty there, and especially when you look at the stat of I think in the 7 games they played in the league, they've conceded first in 5 of those. So they're struggling to adapt to something.
I think uncertainty, drift, and sleepwalking could be the team for this podcast. I can only say this from the point of view of when you're covering games and when you're looking at it, and like Gary again will know better because he's been in the position as a player. But like when Klopp is saying that, I just think it's a case of teams when they can see, like when United finished up after Ferguson, teams just can sense when another team isn't as strong as they are before, and they actually have that little bit of confidence. Do you know what I mean? Where they just they're a bit braver about how they can go about them, and like Liverpool have been punished just because they haven't been hitting those same levels as before in terms of like the way they were playing, because like, let's be honest, they've been the only ones who've stopped Man City from absolutely dominating the league. And now it looks as if maybe Arsenal, that's it, the onus is going to be on Arsenal now to try and keep up with City, because no one else is going to be capable of doing it. But like, again, I genuinely don't get the sense that I think there's loads wrong. There could just be little bits here and there. And because other clubs can maybe sense that, other teams sense it when it, in moments and in games, maybe they have that little bit more adventure, and maybe a fella might push forward a bit more and might want to close down a bit more because you kind of senses it. Whereas when Liverpool were kind of maybe all conquering and dominant, you're kind of fearing a little bit, you're stepping back thinking, oh, if I go here, I could be punished, or if a fella fullback breaks forward, there could be space in behind. And again, I was just looking at it from on Match of the Day with some of the analysis that they gave, and it kind of highlighted a little bit where you just kind of see even Salah maybe not working as hard, going the other way, and little bits like kind of make the point sometimes when I'm doing kind of match reports or kind of analysis pieces on matches where like everything matters in a match. Like little things have little trickle effects where if a fella sees his man not tracking back or doesn't close down, like little things all just add up, and it just adds to a sense of confidence for an opponent. And I think that's just where Liverpool are at the moment, where like they've been so good for so long, and like it could just be a case of bit by bit, not that it needs a massive rebuild, but just kind of finding the little gaps where they can get that, like just maybe just sense of total control back. And that can be difficult. I don't think any team can ever have total control, but Liverpool seem to almost have it in games and before, and it can be easy to look at Van Dijk and all the rest of it, but it's not as if, I think he turned into a meme, I suppose, after that, the thing where when he went to close down Sancho, when he had his hands behind his back and all the rest of it, and it's easy to mock. Sure, people were mocking Haaland during pre-season when he was missing chances, but I think just as easily as you can be asking questions about Liverpool and saying, oh, what's gone wrong, all it will take will be for them to put in a couple of good performances again, which they're well capable of, and getting some serious results. And then they could be back, like in the show, could be back on the road from,
Yeah.
That would be my view of it. I don't think it's one way or the other. It's like, oh, things are crumbling or anything like that. I just think it's just little kind of small margin.
It is little things. I think there's definitely, they played with massive intensity over the last number of years, and that's very hard to maintain that level of intensity. And they were ferocious the way that they press teams. And, it's definitely, you can see that that's just not quite there. And because of that, they're a little bit more fragile then at the back, and they're conceding goals. And you're right in what you say. Like, there's that fear factor with Liverpool. Like, teams used to turn up to Liverpool and they were probably beaten in the tunnel because they're going out here and they're going, well, I hope we don't get a hiding. Where there's not that probably fear factor attached to them right now. Whereas I remember we would go out Dundalk and you look across the tunnel and well, we've got these, we're going to give them a hiding. And Liverpool are probably the same. They look at teams and they say, well, look, we're going to go out. And because they're a little bit fragile, teams sense that. And you've got to remember, like, the Premier League is stacked with teams with huge quality from top to bottom. And if that fear factor is not there and teams are allowed to kind of grow into the game and the press is not quite as ferocious as it has been, well, that gives teams an opportunity, and they sense that at the minute. And look, and you're right in what you say, it won't take a whole lot of fixing, and a small bit. They'll up the intensity. They'll keep a run of clean sheets. Look, I can't see them win the league, but they will probably put together a really, really good run and be very difficult to beat at a point.
And just like on that point you make about players being beaten, like, remember, I don't know if you saw the documentary, the Arsenal documentary, but you see what Arteta did before the Liverpool game last season, where he talked about how much Anfield can have an impact, and he was like blaring during training, you'll never walk alone, and all the atmosphere is just how players could be prepared for it. Like, that was, I know obviously maybe if you watch that documentary, like, Arteta has a few gimmicks with some of his pre-match stuff, but that just gives you an indication of how teams or managers can be thinking about what they were going into with Anfield. Whereas now there just is that little sense that if they're not at it 100%, and listen, they still got back into the game. This is the thing, like, they got back into the game, got ahead in the game, and then Brighton just were able to have that little bit of class and get back in and get their point. But I just definitely don't think there'll be many managers this season playing "You'll Never Walk Alone" and training before playing them this year. But I just don't. I think you can go one way with it and say, oh, like, it's a disaster and all the rest of it. And it probably feels like it because they have been so good. But I do think Klopp is too good of a manager, and the players have shown before that they're too good and not to be able to turn it around and get things right. And it's maybe if they kind of readjust their own kind of ambitions in terms of, they're not going for the league, make sure that they're qualifying and doing well in, say, Champions League, and making sure they're going in for top four. Because like, at the moment, how things are at the moment, nothing is certain for Liverpool. It really isn't.
Yeah, what is certain though, their fixture list in the league, at least, it's Arsenal and then City next after that. So that might just concentrate minds for them as well. But just on the Rangers game, actually, Gary, obviously Rangers have started this group stage campaign in pretty terrible form, 4-0 defeat to Ajax, and then also losing 3-0 to Napoli. Looking at it from a Liverpool point of view, especially at Anfield now, and again, look, we know football is football, and as much as you said, sometimes you have a team beaten in the tunnel, and you can't. There's no givens, but really looking at it both on form, the quality of players on both teams, it's surely a formality.
Well, look, formality would be harsh, but I don't see Rangers getting any change out of Liverpool. Obviously, given the fact that they've had a disappointing, although it's a draw, it's a disappointing result for Liverpool at the weekend. And you can certainly, I think Liverpool will turn up. European nights in Anfield are special, and playing Rangers there, I'm sure they'll be gung ho to get the win, and they need to pick up the maximum points there. But look, I just think that. You're right. You point out Rangers' form coming into it. I think Liverpool will win comfortably.
Yeah, and in the North London derby, David, there were two winners: Arsenal and Matt Doherty.
Yeah. Although, do you know what was curious? I thought it was interesting that Harry Kane was at the NFL match yesterday. They won the Minnesota. Like, could you imagine if that was Paul Pogba? Imagine if Paul Pogba having lost a big derby match. And rocks up the next day, big smile on his face, happy out, not a bother. And your team has just literally lost our biggest match of the season. So that was very interesting. I wonder if there'll be many kind of comment pieces about Harry Kane.
Well, does Graham Souness have something to say? Basically, I think.
And he'll be on TalkSport soon enough. I'm sure there'll be content flying up on Twitter soon enough on social media about what Graham Souness has to say. But again, I just think, like, we're talking about teams. I just think Arsenal and the work at RTÉ I thought he came out on that documentary I mentioned earlier. I thought he came out that very well, just in terms of how he deals with players and some of the stuff I thought was gas of what he does with team talks and all the rest of it. But I'm sure Gary has some stories about Stephen Kenny and what he does as well. Sometimes there's a bit of eccentricity, isn't a bad thing, but I just think, like, the signings he's made have just been so shrewd. Like, recruitment is so important. Like, it's one of the things we talk about Liverpool. Like, when they were getting rid of the players that they were adding in, sometimes unfancy players, and they just made such a big difference to that team and how they wanted to play. And you get that feeling there with Arsenal that's what they've had. Like, the players they've added in, like Saliba, obviously Zinchenko, Gabriel Jesus, like, they've literally added a core to the team, and sometimes it just brings out more from other players around it, like the likes of Xhaka and all, who would have been absolutely hammered by a lot of Arsenal fans. Remember only a few years ago when he was coming off the pitch down, you know what I mean? And, like, sometimes it just needs a bit of I think Arteta has done an exceptional job in galvanising that club and, like, that fan base as well, who were kind of, like, Arsenal would have always been one of those kind of clubs historically, just very respectful to the whole Marble Arch thing and all the rest of it coming through the old Highbury. And yeah, maybe with some of the fan TV stuff that was coming, like, they were becoming a bit of a joke, really, because obviously everything that was coming around it and all the stuff that was going on. But Arteta just seems to, you don't see any of that anymore, because just the work that Arteta has done and also being allowed to do it and being trusted to do it through maybe a difficult point where results weren't going well, So, as I said earlier, I think, like, they were well worth a victory. I think Emerson Royal, like, you would wonder, what will Conte think of that in terms of, I just thought that was a fella taking an easy way out of a game, maybe not having it in him to actually say, oh, well, I'll do this because I might go well with the fans, putting one on an opposition player who's going back towards his own goal and in danger, but just let his team down. And you would think now Doherty will have that chance to get in. And the last time he got in and he kind of stayed there for a bit, there's still obviously doubts. It's clear Conte doesn't 100% fancy him at all. That's clear. That's obvious. Otherwise, he would have started this season. But if he comes in and does well, and I'm guessing he'll play in the Champions League game. I'm guessing he will play, especially if he's going to have to be trusted. Although he was, I don't know. You never know. Yeah, Conte, sometimes he can just, I don't know, torn on a player as well, and he just leaves him out. But you would like to think that for Ireland's sake, Doherty will play games, because I do think, and bring it back to Ireland, I do think his lack of game time cost Ireland a little bit in those games, just because I think in Scotland, definitely tired. I know he highlighted in a piece I did with the 42, like, if you look back at how he tracked back for Armenia's first goal, it was appalling. really was in terms of and that was in the 70th minute, his lack of maybe, I don't think, there's no way he couldn't have understood the danger and saw the danger that the chance was happening when Armenia broke. But like I said, the fella who scores for Armenia is 10 or 15 yards behind them when the first shot is taken, that Bazunu touches onto the post, and yet he still gets there before Doherty. So he needs to play games and he needs to be sharp. And yeah.
Yeah, and finally, before we go, there was also the Manchester derby, which went 6-3 the way of City. I'm not going to talk about Erling Haaland. I think we've said enough about him on this podcast. I don't know what can you add that hasn't already been said about him. I did want to just touch on the point Roy Keane was making about Cristiano Ronaldo being left on the bench for the entirety of the game, and Eric Ten Hag's view afterwards was that he was doing it for Ronaldo's good. I wouldn't bring him in out of respect for his big career. I don't think the look on Ronaldo's face on the bench, I don't know if that will float with him. But the point Roy Keane was making as well was that Man United have shown disrespect to Ronaldo by not allowing him to leave before the transfer window. And Gary, I don't know, do you agree with Roy Keane's take on that? That it has been just like, I mean, on one hand, you have to kind of accept no player is bigger than a club. So there's that as well.
Bear in mind, Gary has got Ronaldo's jersey over his shoulder here. I've got a picture from Harvey Norman, and he has a signed Ronaldo jersey over it.
And I've this world map, which I don't own either. It just happened to come with the place as well. So yeah.
I actually look. I think Roy is right. It's very rare I kind of disagree with Roy. I think he's just so brutally honest when it comes to, you know, Everton, Manchester United, and football in general. I think he a lot of time he's spot on. I think that, you know, he has been, you know, he's a player of his stature. Like, you know, he's one of the best players ever played, and you know, he's the top scorer. I don't know any other club that have their top scorer from the previous season sitting on the bench in a derby game. So when you look at it in that regard, although they're saying he doesn't fit the system and he doesn't press, and Roy makes a point, he puts the ball in the back of the net, which is the most difficult thing to do, and he was their top scorer last year. And then you look at some of the highlights of the game, and you look at the pressing of the players that were, I suppose, suited to the system, were non-existent. You know, like players were allowed to sling balls 60 yards diags across the pitch because there was absolutely no pressure on them. And Manchester City made a show of them. It was embarrassing for Man United and Ten Hag. And, you know, if he wants to leave the top scorer on the bench from now till January and lose him in January possibly, all well and good, but I don't think it'll be good, you know, for him or for the atmosphere or from the fans. Like, I think, you know, if you've got to give him opportunities, like giving him 5 minutes here and there, I think you start and he scores goals. I think he's proven that no matter where he's played, he scored goals. Like, he played in a bad Manchester United team last year and scored over 20 goals. So, you know, they've made a few signings. They need to improve. Obviously, they need to make more signings. But I think, you know, ultimately you need them goals in the team.
Yeah, which I think brings us to an end. So Gary and David, thanks a million for coming on this week. Obviously, Liverpool against Rangers is live on RTÉ2 and the RTÉ Player on Tuesday night. And in the words of David Sneyd, we go again next week.